Fascism is in America and has been for some time now, but there's still quite a large contingent of people who don't see it that way, who don't identify the trajectory that America's taken into the far right and into authoritarianism. And part of that is intentional. I mean, if you're someone on the far right, you want to sort of maintain the illusion of normalcy for as long as possible. You want people to acclimatize and to underplay and to believe that things are largely just going about their usual routines. But there's also an element of fascism as normalcy in general, fascism as what people are used to. America, for quite a few years now, has been slowly scaling back its rights for its citizens, its general happiness and well-being as a nation. It's been falling further into angrier rhetorics and ideas of fervent nationalism and enemization, aggression against those considered the other. And I think this recent turn we're seeing, this recent stage of fascism, with the deployment of troops in various cities, Los Angeles a few months ago and still ongoing, Washington D.C. now targeted by Trump's deployment of the National Guard and the FBI. Other cities he says he wants to look at, doing the same things in. These are quite obvious and blatant fascist steps. They're quite horrific steps into the world of the far right, where power is absolute and where the president can just decide he wants to concentrate his militant police force and such and law enforcement into areas that he deems unsafe and warranting of such a force. And at every turn, you see the far right nonsense. The claim that crime is a factor in why these sent troops. They're not even a factor, the main reason, right? They're out of control. Well, the statistics show they're not. So he is just lying, which is what fascists do. They have to lie to justify their worldview. But it's also, in some ways, a redefinition of what crime is. The crime here is that their power has been questioned. All the places that law enforcement gets sent into are traditionally quite Democrat. They're naturally going to be filled with people who aren't the racist view of America, so non-white, LGBTQ, people who tend to be more left-wing, which is typical of any city, which is why cities are often targeted by fascist leaders, especially in the sort of modern era, right? You increase your police presence because you want to control the potential of protest. You want to clamp down on dissent. And where's there going to be dissent? Where the people in the crosshairs of fascism are more congregated. It obviously helps that the White House is in Washington D.C. So of course, the idea of a big protest right on your doorstep probably isn't appealing to Trump. He's now got a justification for a large military presence in the capital. It is scary. I think when you look at the footage, when you see just troops and armed officials wandering around, it is an intentional show of power. It's them saying we're in charge, we're the far right, and we're armed, right? So you can't. We now have given ourselves justification to shoot and kill anyone on the basis of protecting the people and lowering crime. It's all in the fascist playbook. It's what a fascist leader does. They maintain power through violence. They maintain capital and they maintain class relations through extreme power. In this case, the far right devolvement of capitalism into fascism, the natural tendency to seek further power from capitalists being manifested through the police and through the FBI and through various bodies they've given power and given false justification to suppress the masses. Because this isn't a popular decision, even within the organisations that are being used to do this, there's dissatisfaction essentially showing us somewhere that didn't need it to enforce Trump's will. It's an alarming turn, and I think that it's staggering that there's still people who openly deny this. In some ways, in fact, it's not in some degree, because denial is quite a large part of how our right wing ecosystem has turned of late, right? Like they increasingly have divorced themselves from the reality that we live in. Climate change is affecting everyone, but there's people who downplay it or actively deny it, as we're increasingly seeing. In fact, America are currently rewriting their scientific reports to update to this new alternate reality that has been generated. They don't care for material truth. They're interested in their own power, as per the tenets of capitalist discourse. But you would have no issue with many of these sort of right-wing pundits and media figures, and even just the average right-wing person saying, fascism is military and the police on the streets, and the general consolidation of power by political forces, and there's oppression of dissent and such. They'd say the right wing's not like this, Trump's not like this, he's not doing that, he'd never say that. And yet here we are. They were wrong pretty much about everything, and have been for many, many years. But the analysis that's been offered about Trump and the far right and fascism has been consistently bad from centrists, of course, and people in the centre, but specifically the right wing analyses. They've not actually matched up with reality, and yet we're still, even now, seeing the same. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, it's not that bad, or just total agreement. They've either been radicalized by fascism, or they're still living in a fantasy land where the events we're literally seeing right now aren't happening. I don't believe that it's a complete denial. They must know on some level that it's not okay, but the conditioning, the way that American society has organized itself, encourages allegiance with the nation. And as Trump and his fascist movement are the leading figures of the nationalist movement right now, this has some inherent affinity with people that are influenced so heavily by the American project. The America first, make America great again, right? Once you start going down that pathway of accepting the capitalist logics and accepting the right wing mantra, individualism and the America first, of course you're going to be more sympathetic and even approving of the absolute power that Trump is angling for. Being able to take control of police forces and having the freedom to say, yeah, I want this city locked down, I want to impose curfews, I want to basically decide where our resources should be without any input from anyone else. These are obvious actions of a fascist dictator, and now they're American policy. And because they're American policy, because it's wrapped up in the language of controlling crime and affecting the troubled populations of America and restoring American pride, it's permitted. It's seen as something which is justified and okay. I just think that it's so alarming and scary that there's large portions of even supposedly fairly liberal and critical voices who are still trying to find some legal technicality or some error or some way of saying, yeah, there was some justification for this, and it's just a little bit excessive. There's still a lack of calling it for what it is. It's an openly fascist move from a fascist government, and there's no overreaction. If anything, we're underreacting. We're seeing blatant show of power and not really doing enough to question what's going on, to oppose quite vehemently the fact that a capital city's been occupied by the president's forces. It's not good. It's not a healthy place for a nation to be in, and by extension the world, because when a nation like America turns to fascism or is taken over by fascists, it has a ripple effect. It takes over the minds of people who are looking on. And here we are, we're not in a great space, because DC, as Trump signalled himself, is only the first. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that this is happening to a city with lots of black people in it, and the American project, the MAGA project, is a racist one. It's one that wants to revert to previous standards and expectations of racial relations, i.e. white on top, black underneath. And the other cities he's mentioned, Chicago and New York and Baltimore, and they're all cities which have lots of ethnic minorities and groups that are marginalised. And obviously the far right exist to try and maintain social hierarchies across all sorts of identities, right? So it's not just racial, it's gender, it's sexuality, it's disability, nationality, it's all sorts. But central to a lot of it is the racial, very visual image of black people is something which bothers the far right. They don't like the idea of America as having racial equality. And cities which see lots of people of different ethnicities and skin complexions is something which visually they find repellent. And so they like the idea of the police being in these places in significant numbers because it fits with their narrative of the black problem needing to be controlled. They want law enforcement. The symbol of America in their mind is militant force and power. And so the idea that you can send a lot of people like that into black areas, crime areas, when crime and black are equivalent in their mind, creating that image and enforcing it is what they wish to do. And as it is fascist to do these things, they are embracing of fascism. They know that it's not contravening with the ideas of freedom, but they don't care because they are fascists. And the sooner everyone who dislikes this idea, dislikes this policy, is able to say that, the better for everyone. If we can identify that this is not okay and this is fascist and say it out loud and act accordingly, the sooner we can actually start seeing some positive change and some movement away from these directions. Because, I'm saying this in Britain, it won't be long till this happens in Britain as well, right? We've got a supposedly liberal, increasingly right wing government. We've got fascists in the streets in certain places, but also waiting in politics. Mr. Farage is certainly in the news a lot. We've got to be a bit more vigilant. We've got to be a bit more aware of the fact that we actively have a fascist government in the US and we have one in waiting, seemingly, in the UK, before things get too much, because it's not good.